Welcome back to post-lunch session on food and nutrition security. It is my honor and privilege to welcome all the panel members and the moderator of the session to the dais. I request the moderator, Mr. S. Sivakumar, Chairman, CII National Agriculture Council and Group Head, Agri and IT Business ITC Limited, to moderate the discussion. Thank you.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thought we would call it a post-lunch session, since lunch is still happening, at least in part of the room. We can also call it a combined lunch session. Welcome back after a productive morning sessions. This time, last month, the SOFI report was released. SOFI as in the state of food and nutrition in the world, which has concluded that 2030, we will nowhere be close to achieving SDG 2, which is the hunger. The conclusion there, the SDG, as you know, is to have a hunger-free world. Yet, as we are pretty much past the midway for SDGs, and the expectation as we stand today is that we would still possibly have as many as 600 million people who will be undernourished because of the significant poverty, which is slightly better than where we are today. The midpoint of the current estimate is a little over 700 million. So it's a 100 million improvement in the remaining years. And the current number itself actually is higher than where we were already in the pre-COVID years. So we were at about 8% of the world population. Currently we are at 9%, and the best estimate is that probably will get to 7%. So far from the 0 that we want to get to. Now this is on one side. The report also goes on to say that people who cannot afford to access a healthy diet is nearly 40% of all population because of the higher food prices, and partly also because of through COVID and post-COVID impact on the incomes. Now this nutrition challenge is besides the nutrition challenge at the other end, where we have, because of unhealthy diets, the health impact like obesity and so on. So this is the broad spectrum of the scale that we need to tackle. And there is obviously a good reason as to why these estimates were done, despite the best intent that there will be a larger population much of that population also growing in relatively poorer countries where with incomes increasing, per capita food consumption going up, we certainly need more food production. And we need that higher food production without consuming the kind of resources that we had consumed in the past, be it the land or water or the pace at which we are eroding the topsoil, or even the amount of GH emissions that we were releasing. We are already for the last 20 days, for this year, living on borrowed resources. Early August, we already crossed the Earth Overshoot Day, and for remaining few months of this year, we actually are not borrowing, we should say stealing the resources from our children and their children. So that is also an untenable situation, which is one of the reasons as to why meeting that production remains an issue. And then on top of that, we also have the climate change, extreme weather events. In India alone, 89% of every single day of the last 365, there's some extreme weather event in one or the other part of the country. So that has its own impact on the production side. And then you also have other impacts like the geopolitical conflict, in addition to domestic conflicts in many countries. That also has the challenge on access to food. So I think there are a host of reasons as to why the food and nutrition challenge remains a big challenge that we need to tackle. Of course, there are positive elements in terms of progress in the agricultural technologies, potential usage of digital technologies, and more innovation that is happening in social security schemes, and a host of other elements. So in this backdrop, what innovations can we bring to the table to tackle beyond what the world has seen? What are some of the positive experiences that we have seen, and how do we take this forward and get closer to zero hunger, if not fully zero hunger, as we had envisioned in the SDGs. So we have amongst us the panelists who are across the whole value chain, and therefore they have their own vantage point. Everybody has presence in the full value chain, and yet their own vantage point from which they can see this problem and share their perspectives on what could possibly be done, what are the solutions that we could embark on. And so we will initially go around the panelists for about 5 minutes each for their opening remarks, and then possibly a follow-up question that I may have for all of them based on what they are saying, and then open up for questions that all of you may have. So with that said, may I first request D. Narayan from Bayer to share his opening remarks.
Thanks, Shiv. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see all of you and also reconnect with some old friends as well in this room. Shiv articulated the challenge very, very well, so I'm not going to repeat it. The only other two dimensions I'll add is the aspirations of India as we stand here today for the future, especially as we talk about wanting to be the third largest economy in the world and young India as well. If these issues are not tackled, then a lot of it can get derailed significantly. But having said that, I look at the world all over and the global situation and look at where we are today. I actually feel we are starting from a position of strength. It's a question of how are we going to harness all the resources, tools available to make this a real success. That is the starting point. The second aspect I would also highlight from what we are seeing right now in front of us, Shiv articulated the challenges very well about climate change and the challenge of water, soil health, all of these clearly are there. But what is even more important is, with the way the society is growing, for Indian agriculture in particular, the transition of labor moving out of agriculture is also real. So that is a big piece of the equation that we need to bring to the table. So therefore, if you look at everything that is there today and look at it 10, 20 years out, what are some of the 3 or 4 things that we can do to really transition this, that we support agriculture right to be a high-performing contributor to the economy, and also the biggest issue is farmer income, right? Because that is the big piece that is right there in front of us. And I'll talk about a few of the large themes, at least from the vantage point that Shiv, we talked about and what we are seeing, which is going to be very critical. The first piece is smallholder agriculture globally and India in particular can only be solved, the challenges, with collectivization. So therefore, the starting point is driving some of the initiatives that we have ongoing with the farmer producer organization or other private sector initiatives to bring farmers together is the starting point. The second big piece of this whole challenge I clearly see is the topic of, farmer profitability, productivity, all of those things cannot be solved in isolation by any one player. It has to be connected, crop clusters and value chains. And the more we can drive farm clusters and crop value chains, the end results we've seen is success for the farmers and also success for sustainability as well. That is the second element. The third element, and I think this is at the heart of the whole conversation, policy and the role of policy, and how can we pivot to drive policy in an integrated way, crop by crop, not in a fragmented manner. And the reason I highlight this very, very clearly is that if we don't get our act together from a policy standpoint to drive crop competitiveness, we'll be sitting here 10 years out and still be talking about challenges. And the reason I'm highlighting all of these thematically is these are within our control. And finally, the topic which we said, innovation, and innovation has to be across the whole value chain. And as an input company, Bayer today, our core goal will continue to be how do you produce more, at the same time, how do you restore more to the environment? That is very clear, that the table stakes. But then, unless you drive the innovation across the whole value chain, the results will not be possible. And finally, I'll leave it with an optimistic note and transition to the other speakers here. We don't have to wait for innovation. It is already here. It's a question is how do you harness everything that is there in front of us and to really make ourselves more competitive. And I go back to my earlier point on the global challenges. We can not only solve the challenges of India and everything that we are seeing today, but we can be a major producer for the rest of the world if we get our act right. So with that, Shiv, back to you.
Thanks, Steve. So there are broader solution themes that we could look at and take that with a note of optimism and then turn to Sanjay from Olam and look at, from his vantage point, what he sees as the food and nutrition security challenges and what solutions that we could look at.
Thank you, Shiv, and thank you, Narayan, for your perspectives. I'm afraid a little bit of overlap might be there in what I talk about compared to what Shiv and Narayan have said. So just to give a little bit of background about what is what do I do and the organization I'm employed with. Basically, our model is all about connecting farms all over the world to markets all over the world. We are present in about 65, 70 countries, and we take charge of the commodity as close to the farms as possible and take them all the way to the consuming markets, wherever each of the commodity value chain has the markets. So by virtue of that, we are right in the thick of this whole issue of food availability and connecting, producing regions to markets. And many of these issues which we are discussing, those are central to our business model. Looking at India, we are paradoxically, and I call it a paradox, we are paradoxically food surplus. We have food surpluses across a range of commodities, and we are year after year increasing our exports. And exports are getting broad-based. Exports of processed foods are also increasing. But at the same time, we are top of the league as far as malnutrition is concerned, the hunger index is concerned, the stunted and wasted children that we have. I think India, among the top 20 economies in the world, has the highest percentage of these not so savory social indices. Now, given this situation, I think there is obviously an imbalance which is there in our overall food system. We are producing what probably we don't need as much as we produce. Two, whatever is being produced, either it gets wasted on the way or it doesn't reach all the intended consumers. So there are anomalies in the distribution system which are there. Now, this is something where I think policymakers and the businesses, farmers, all the key players have different roles to play. Coming to the farm levels, I think a lot has happened, but a lot still needs to happen in terms of enhancing farm productivity. Given our experience in multiple countries, we see that similar economies, Indonesia, Vietnam, Mexico, South Africa in some ways, we are much below them as far as farm productivity of various major food commodities are concerned. So it goes without saying, I think that's the lowest, that's the key focus area. You have to first attack the supply side of this game. You need to focus on farm productivity, and multiple things need to happen there. The budgetary allocations for agri-infrastructure, for generally agriculture, extension of agriculture services, all that has to go up so that capability building in the agricultural system goes up dramatically. And we have seen that wherever those interventions have happened, it has definitely paid dividends. So that's one part where a policy pivot in terms of substantially enhancing the game, in terms of the kind of contributions which are required to enhance productivity, that needs to happen. The other part is that how do you connect farms to markets, farms to factories? And that's where I think, again, policy pivots are required, and we need to not only link them very seamlessly with the front end of the value chain so that agriculture becomes more demand-oriented rather than remains supply-oriented. The second part is that how do you enhance more and more food processing? So that involves changes in regulations, attracting foreign direct investment, because India has not been very successful in attracting a lot of foreign direct investment in the food supply chain. We have been of late successful in getting it in electronics, in automobiles, even in defense in some ways. But agriculture, which is at the heart of our economy and society, I think their large, big-ticket investments have not happened. And if you look at the largest players in the food and agri industry globally, they have minuscule operations compared to their global size. They have minuscule operations in India. So their investments, their participation has not got enhanced. And I think that's something which we need to ask ourselves why that is not happening. Because these firms, these investors are critical for bringing the necessary sophistication, technology, processes, market linkages, and the desired human capital which this sector badly requires. So that's another part which we need to look at. India theoretically can be a food basket for the world, and actually we can address the risk and the insecurities which a lot of countries in the Indian Ocean rim area suffer from. That can happen if we are able to fully leverage the very considerable endowments which India has. The river systems that we have, water is under stress, but still we have one of the best river systems in the world. We have very diverse agroclimatic zones, so we grow any and everything which is majorly required across the world. We also have a large coastline, so we are not a landlocked country. So in terms of the cost for exports, the logistics cost for exports can theoretically be very, very efficient. It is not, that is another matter, but that's something which can also happen. I think then the requirement for Indian food and nutrition security is another issue which needs to be addressed. We do depend on rest of the world for certain food commodities. And that's where I think the way we forge partnerships with other countries, the way we do the right quid pro quo and have the right bilateral agreements or trade pacts to ensure that we bring in the required commodities as cost effectively, as competitively, and as affordably for the Indian population. That is another area which we need to look at. So I think these are some of the things which are very important from a food and nutrition security point of view as far as India is concerned, and how India can contribute to the larger global food system. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjay. So I see a couple of solution themes there as well, particularly the special corridors, if one were to say, between the partner countries for food security as an additional theme besides what was discussed. Let me now turn to Ankita and request her for opening remarks. Ankita from PepsiCo.
So thanks so much, Shiv, and great points from my co-panelist. I would take a little different twist here, given that I'm coming from a nutrition science background and dealing with consumers of different socio-economic segment. So let's divide food and nutrition security into two parts now. So when we look at food insecurity, why it is arriving, key reasons could be lack of availability, affordability, of course, awareness again, but primarily cost and I would say availability have huge role to play here. However, when we talk about nutrition security, the same reasons which apply for food security will definitely apply, but the other reasons could be lack of awareness and lack of choices, and people probably are aware of the choices, but food ultimately is a lot to do with the palate as well. It's about culture, it's about tradition, it's about what I have grown up with. So when we talk about, and today I would say millet is such a great example. We had it in India as a heritage, and somewhere it got lost. If you look at the government schemes, multiple years have gone in now, but so many years back probably when the Green Revolution was there, our nutrition guidelines, which I go back and see, they are talking about whole grains, they are talking about a lot of fiber consumption. But if you talk about the kind of incentives which the farmers are getting, they are getting incentive to grow, say, rice, wheat. So if the incentives, if the produce does not happen, no matter how much awareness you create, the availability would not be there. The choices, more choices would not be there. So I think I struggled quite a bit to understand that how do we marry the guidance which is being provided from a pristine level to say this is what you should consume versus ultimately the choice which a consumer is going to make. So we also did a study with the urban consumers who had the knowledge, who had the means. We did the study to understand that what is their, and specifically after COVID, what is their view of nutrition. Till today, the view of nutrition is that it has to have a balance, and probably millets, when we talk about, they would want to consume millets. There was no awareness. So much awareness has gone up. But the choices in the market have to be there. And hence comes the role of industry and corporate. Are we really giving in the right choices in the market? Now, why will industry go and have choices in the market? A, either there is a consumer demand, or B, there is a great incentive. So when the consumer demand is not there at all, even if the ingredient or the food item which is locally produced is great, but consumer demand is not there because awareness is not there, probably liking is not there. So we can play and we can have a huge role on creating awareness. But it has to be followed up with the whole incentive where the industry, agriculture, they all are also incentivized to go ahead and produce it. So I would say some fabulous schemes like we had the PLI scheme which came in, which gave some incentive. But again, the question comes that if we really want to tackle the food and nutrition security, our efforts, do they have to be sporadic or continuous? Like once a PLI scheme came, it closes, then should there be some more schemes which come? Should it be opened again that, more corporates come in, there are more choices which the consumers get. So hence I would say that when we talk about a whole ecosystem transition, all the elements in the ecosystem have to talk to each other. We cannot have guidelines which are something very different. We cannot have food incentives, the farmer incentives, which are absolutely different and not in sync. So they all have to be in sync. And second, these efforts cannot be sporadic. So I'm so glad that at least in India and this whole panel discussion also, we are not making those sporadic efforts. We are now having the level of dialogues have increased and level of actions which it is getting translated into, those have also increased. So I think definitely we are in a better place, but still we are not meeting the SDG goals yet, but at least the appreciation of it has increased many folds in the years to come. It will grow further, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Ankita. Once again, a call for more integrated kind of an approach, especially calling out the role of incentives in making every actor play their bit. And with a millets thought that you triggered, it's time to turn to Dr. Dayakar, who is a millets expert amongst us from the Indian Institute of Millets Research. Dr. Dayakar, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shiva. I think I just put the title that India is moving from food to nutrition security. The needs then, when we were thinking about the food insecurity at the time of independent India were different. Perhaps the quantitative terms was needed and the governments have taken up very rightly. But I think suddenly when we wake up and see that we are far from achieving the nutrition security. And this is what it is very important for us to relook into the entire thing, not just in quantitative terms, but in quality terms. Then the whole gamut of many other problems like macro health problems and nutrition problems come up. This country, we have more than 50% of people still under the malnutrition. Latest NHF data that a pregnant woman, lactating woman, MAM children, SAM children, you all know, aware about the statistics that are coming up and all those things. And there is a lot of variation across the country about this. So these are some of the problems. Apart from that, then we have other things like a hidden hunger, micronutrient deficiency. Outward we are fine, but inside we know that our system lacks thoroughly in that. And the third aspect I would like to cover is about the new lifestyle diseases that are coming up, and India has a dubious distinction of being there on the top, so along with China and other places. It's all primarily due to the food habits has something to do with it. And the behavioral changes are very important for us to see that won't happen overnight. And the nutrition science definitely points at that we need to have a diversified diet. So I think the world has to move in the direction having attained the food security. But again, the food security in a situation like Ukraine war and the food supplies and prices and the shortages that are happening, I think we need to look into that perspective too. Now, I just come from the millet fraternity, so I would like to, given little time, that I would like to concentrate on the millets. I'm just beginning that this particular grain, millets, they are known because of the small grains. By all virtues, they are small in nature, but they are nutrition storehouses. Another point that today why we need to really talk about is the climate resilience. Is there any other crop where you can think about having all these virtues put together in a small grain, tiny grain? So this is what it is, the question. I think good that wisdom prevailed and we are going back to the roots and then just trying to rediscover what is there in our own storehouse. And then we opened the doors, and thanks to the Prime Minister taking this forward. But then there are see, a grain which is grown for the farmer for his own consumption. Today he has to grow for your sake and my sake. That is what is very much important. Now we are in the International Year of Millets 2023. The year has come. Perhaps the year will be over in another 4 months. I think, but more important thing is that what is that we are setting up? What is that we are really just taking the world? What is the intention in taking this as a crop which is of 1 year, identifying just like, because we see the learnings from quinoa, that in 2013 when they declared that. So the value chains are very important. In today's context, it is not the agriculture per se in silos, for nutrition not in per se, not in food technology, entrepreneurship, business, incubation, all these things must, including the policy, must really just integrated in such a way that building up a value chain, a crop value, somebody, Narayan was talking about the value chain and all those things. What it is, 50 years ago, we never thought that the rice and wheat could attain this status. So this gives us a hope for us to look forward for that. It's good that we started thinking about it and implementing the policies, taking a leadership role in taking to the world. This is very, very big thing actually. So somebody said that you need to aim big. So India is taking up that as definitely we have a strategic position to really influence the world as a global hub of millets. And through millets, taking this message very clearly, it's food and nutrition sector. Another angle that is that the land that is there with us, whether India or other places, that it is a limited resource, and where we see all that irrigation that has come up, fine. When irrigation comes, it goes up for other crops. But that minimum critical land that is available with us is limited. In India, it is about close to 50% is still dry land. And these are the sustainability. So taking this consideration, and also from the very beginning itself, why you talk about the nutrition should come from the Mother Earth. So from there, the thinking should come. The biofortification, what we are talking, is again an important thing, that how we can bring that. So we have learned quite a good lessons in terms of the food security, in terms of making it available, accessible to the people. But taking a step further, I think a new opportunity that has come, millets, take it to the world. So I think with all the learnings that which we do, that don't over processing. Sir was talking, Sanjay was talking about you do that processing like rice, wheat. These are all the lessons that we have. Over processes, today's maladies are primarily because of the ultra processing that has taken place. So can we, when we introduce this sort of millets and the new underutilized species and all those things, we have an opportunity to come with much more wisdom and try to see that the nutrition may be taken to the world and the goodness of the millets may be taken to especially the vulnerable groups. I think these are my initial remarks. I would like to leave it to you.
Thanks, Dr. Dayakar. Let me put it back as a question to you to start with. I mean, obviously, if we had rice and wheat, which largely delivered food security, and we probably need diversified crops for nutrition security, millets will certainly play a role, and possibly fruits and vegetables and some other crops that we haven't touched upon just now. But that certainly diversification we take away as a solution theme from what you said to achieve the nutrition security. So there is a fair amount of buzz just now about millets, because this being an international year of millets, like we had seen 10 years ago on quinoa, which then moved on and became popular. But if you have to really continue with this momentum and really get millets mainstreamed and become a significant part of the diets in the country, around the world, as one route to tackle both food and nutrition security, mind you, because it's also a climate resilient as well as low resource consuming crop. What are the other things that we must do so that this sustains beyond the International Year of Millets?
I think that's a very good question, sir. I think it's time for us to think beyond. Definitely we are in that celebration, and I see 20 departments are roped in by the government in more than 20 and taking to the world the message of this millets and Michelin. In Washington, D.C., the millets are served. Okay, you can celebrate those things, but beyond that is the question that pertains to us. Is that a one-time fad, or you would like to sustain it further and all those things? See, first of all, we need to make it a pan-India. See, what it is, the traction that it got, it is in South India, especially southern states have taken lead in just taking the millet promotion. It's not just, I think, what you are hearing about millets, and we both were the earlier days, at least about 10 years, 12 years ago, then we put on a drawing board, and then we worked out how the value chain for the millets has to be done. And together with ITC, we worked with Indian Institute of Millet Research and built a value chain and piloted. So that's fine, but now scaling up. So when we are talking about that, see, until and unless it is a state subject, this embracement won't take place. And many millet machines that are coming up now, Odisha millet machine, Karnataka millet machine, it has to be a pan-India. So they must own it, and then they should be able to do that. When it comes to that, again, there is an incentivization. The farmer, why he should grow? He has more choices of crop. If he has to grow, then what is the new thing that is coming up in terms of the price and remuneration? Not just declaring MSP and without procuring, leave it like that. There is a model that which we have seen with the ITC e-Chopal based thing, where the procurement is made market assured model. We found that that's sort of an incentivization, and the type of the system that in e-Chopal system with the information, all the extension services that are provided, and buyback, that made a lot of impact. And we saw in Parbhani and other districts of Maharashtra that a lot of track, and farmers started thinking that there is money in these millets. And then he shifted from normal, poor dry land to better lands. So this is what the realization that which we need to make through these millet machines at the state level. That is one important thing, where the farmer should be made a very vital keg in trying to do that. Otherwise, this area will not increase. All this promotional campaign and all those things happen if the profits won't trickle down to the farmer. There is no, you see the production figures and the other things. It has come from 15 million hectares, million tons to 20 million tons. But it has to grow phenomenally, the type of the demand. No crop in this country was given such a promotional campaign. Let me tell you that. Please show me that even at the time of the independence, India, rice and wheat were not given as much as now. If this is not going to be taken as an opportunity, then it will be a difficult thing. Then there are some issues that are regarding to that, how these partnerships can be built in. Very, very important, especially the industry must be able to own this, and some investment that should also come through that. I think it started happening. So let us not build a program for 1 year. It has to go beyond that, say about 5 years or 10 years, and then see how these things. Now we see that Pepsi, ITC millet machine, Britannia, name any FMCG, I think all of them they got converted. They are trading very cautiously. But before that, about 500 startups are there now. 500 startups have come up with our millet-based startups who are taking up. And so how these can be the backward, the industry, how it can take care of the farmer backward FPOs and forward startups, and then take it under. So industry has a very huge role, and the government policy need not say it should not die down. It should has to go, especially in terms of there are various issues that come up now. So a program like a PLI scheme, that is a very good thing, the way the production linked incentive of the Ministry of Food Processing. I think that has brought in many of the industries into this mainstreaming millets and all that. Now the other thing is that, are we really just catering to the urban poor or rich, or are we looking for the taking these millets to those vulnerable groups? So mainstreaming millets in public funded programs. Some pilots have been taken up, but we should not stop there. We need to go beyond that. Now the export markets has to be strengthened. So this is very important. I think APIDA is taking a very lead, but is it for a year or another? I think maybe a decade they must be able to that. Now India is the 5th largest exporter of that. They were doing it the commodity trading. Now they should get into the value added products also, so that we get good in and take these things. And all these startups are the facade of the promotion of millet promotion. Now awareness campaign government must be taking up now, but after some time, perhaps we do not know. So I think a millet promotion council must be established. This is very important. It has to be industry led. As government bodies, we have all the credit to build up all the value chains, piloting and all those things. But I think we would like to see the industry taking this, whether the government funds it or not. So the industry must be able to take a lead further, because now there is a great opportunity across the globe also. Africa, they grow excessively millets and all those things. They don't have this value chain. No machinery, nothing, just a traditional form of that we have. We can transfer our technology, build up centers of excellence across where the millet growing countries. So millet need not be promoted in the areas where it is grown. It is about your health. So it has to be pan-India and global. So India should take a vital role in making it a global hub of millets.
Right. Thank you.
Can I just respond, Dr. Dakarong? I'm a big fan. Now, I've got converted to millet in a lot of what I eat. But the reason I'm making this point is we need to somehow blend it into the cuisines at the homes all over the country, right? Because that awareness is still not there. And that has to be a big part of the push, because ultimately it has to be demand ground up that will drive the whole cultivation as well.
Sir, I just want to add one thing. It's not millets and wheat are the same. To bring millets to this stage minus gluten is a horrendous task, because this protein which is present in millet, wheat is very amenable for processing. But minus that in millets, taking and bringing on par with rice and wheat. So huge amount of research. Instead of tweaking in protein, what we did is we tried to work with the starch and its gelatinization to make an alternate system of processing. So now I think once upon a time there were lots of comments I used to listen about that. Now today I am very happy that the chefs have entered into this thing. They will bring the ingredient mix, how to camouflage and then bring it. So see, for rice to mainstream it took long years. But today technologies fortunately are there and we can make them. And there are huge we have come out with the international cuisines. Now that is circulated across all the embassies in the whole of the globe and all that. So things are happening, but it should happen more, and see that ultimately health meets taste.
Right. Thank you. Since the mic is with you, Dee, let me ask you. No, we have this whole issue of where do we go, how do we solve the food and nutrition problem has come quite often in the past. It's not as if this is the first time that the world is worried. But every time that worry was there, among other things, I think at the core was the various agricultural technologies, the research that happened, that really helped push the productivity up, deal with all kinds of stresses, and then we have moved forward and we continue to be having that. While yes, there is an affordability, accessibility issues and nutrition, some of that is there, but research has played a crucial role. But given the different kind of challenges that we all talked about that are existing for tomorrow versus what they were in the past, what kind of a role do you see for agricultural research and should the focus be any different in the future than it was in the past?
That's a great question, Shiv, because the heart of it is what you said, productivity, right? You need to be able to produce more with the same amount of land or even less. I'll just give a bit of a perspective from Bai's perspective so that then contrast to your broader question. If you look at the research that goes in the company, we spend upwards of close to $3 billion every year on research in agriculture, seeds, biotechnology, crop protection, biologicals, a whole host of different technologies that exist. And these, we bring it all over the world. So that is the starting point. But having said that, what has changed even as we look at it from our lens, right? One, while improving productivity is still the biggest goal out there, but then what is clearly, which goes along with it is the key elements of sustainability. How do you produce with more efficient use of water? How do you restore soil health? And then more importantly, Shiv, we talked about the topic of emissions. How do you bring that into the equation? And then the broader topic of nutrition itself, and how do you bring varieties that are being selected from a nutrition perspective as well for the various crops that we are in. And finally, climate resilience, right? So all these are coming very clearly into the research programs. And the way the research programs evolved, I'll just talk about breeding, for example, this breeding seeds, right? It's evolved to precision breeding where today you're able to target the problems and breed solutions directly. And the time it took, let us say, 10 years in the past, today you're able to bring it to the market faster in 2 to 3 years. So that is a big quantum jump that technologies have, are evolving to, right? But if you take all of these, the biggest opportunity, and even companies like us, is we cannot innovate alone. So even in our research work that we do, we partner with a lot of companies, big, small, startups, right? Because this is collaborative research is also a big game changer as we speak. So that is the other big mindset, even for large companies, right, is we can only innovate within, but now we are very open and bringing in a lot of startups and collaboratively innovating in the whole process as well. And finally, Shiv, this whole topic of digital, which you talked about, is a game changer even for research as well. Today, we are able to get outstanding insights from farmers' fields as we are driving innovation in our labs as well, right? In the past, a lot of, for example, just the breeding programs, 10 years back, we would have almost 2 to 3 million acres around the world where breeding research would happen. Today, that has come down to less than tens of thousands because the way the breeding technologies have evolved with predictive analytics, with clearly direct insights coming in, and what we can do with this has completely been a big transformation as well. So I think clearly their answers are there and technology is moving in the right direction. But what we have to ensure is access to technologies for small farmers. And here again, I think India has played a big role in bringing new technologies, and we'll have to accelerate it faster. I see no reason why, if you take crop protection, for example, the approval process for bringing new molecules here should be any different than what happens in the US or Brazil or even closer home in Southeast Asia, right? It has to be on par. So we need to work on policy to accelerate it. The second aspect I would also clearly highlight is there are numerous technologies which are out there which we should open the door and bring this in faster, because these are the things that will solve the problems that we are facing today more than ever before. So I personally feel pretty optimistic that we are on the right track, and technologies have made a difference for the country, and it'll be the same for the future as well.
Good. Thank you. I think science and technology does hold promise. That's what you are saying for future as much as it did in the past. But the key is really also taking it to small farmers and accelerating that bringing. So let me turn to Ankita. Much of what we discussed, we talked as if there's one global solution for many things that we are doing. With your experience as a multi-local company around the globe, do you see that we look at one global solution for food security, or do we need to look at multiple local solutions? I mean, how does one deal with it?
Sure, thanks, Shiv. So I'd say that strategy can be global, but in my experience, what I have seen that adaptation, implementation, because it is local, at a local level also there is like, there could be a big global, big strategy, but at a local level there could be a translation of that strategy, which is more adaptable to the local audience. So I'll give you an example. We had a project on malnutrition in Mexico. It was a great success there. We were reaching out to some 30,000 children, giving, and this is a non-commercial product, cookie, which was being given to them. And the adoption and the impact was huge. Senior leadership told us that, AMISA, like we are in the South Asia sector, this region needs, that translation much more than any other region. So go ahead and, take this project and roll it out in India. We thought it was very simple. We have a global strategy. We have a solution. We just need to go ahead and execute it. But all our projects, all our timelines got impacted because when we went to locally translate it, of course, you're talking about a cookie in Mexico, it might be very generic, it might be acceptable, but in India, would I as a nutrition science person want to give a cookie in the local domain? Of course not. We looked at local translations, we felt multigrain, we looked at millet, and we translated into a different product which has millet, and again, this is a completely non-commercial philanthropic effort. Within different districts also we saw, and different age groups, when we were speaking to children of 3 to 5 years of age, again the same product solution didn't work. Because the appetite is not as much, the small meals children would have. So I think the localization with the global framework, localization is critical. And even when we talk about, say, whether we talk about food and nutrition security in the same breath or in, differently, I would say that we have a global framework. All WHO has given some guardrails, but at an India level, the integration which we all have been talking about, the partnerships which we have all been talking about, we will have to work jointly in this region to come up with solutions, and those solutions within India also may not be same. We might have to further subdivide it. So that's what I
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. So let me turn to Sanjay at the end and ask him. We talked about partnerships across the countries as a way to solve the food and nutrition security. But we have seen in the recent past, one of the major disruptors of food security was the geopolitical situation. Even in the past, around the war's time and Cold War subsequently and so on, it is always geopolitical situation which is a big disruptor of food security around the world. So will tomorrow's partnerships be any different from yesterday's partnerships? How would the world structure these partnerships to succeed in this race to beat the insecurity of food and nutrition?
Yeah. See, I think it's a circle of life. Currently, the wheel has turned a full circle, and we are going back to the pre-trade liberalization times. In the 1990s, trade used to be very restricted, and we had a dream run of almost 20 years when goods and services flowed very seamlessly between different parts of the world. But due to various issues, geopolitical largely, I mean, there are walls which are going up now. We see that happening everywhere. But that's not sustainable, because that would leave a large part of the global population very vulnerable to food security or nutritional security related issues. And I think that countries and private sector, various stakeholders would find ways. I think even if it is not a multilateral partnership, I would expect bilateral partnerships to come up at the global level, where, let's say, India and Indonesia could have a bilateral pact. We need their oil, they need our rice. or similar, other partnerships could be there. We could have partnerships with some West African countries. It couldn't be only food, but it would straddle across multiple areas. So you may need oil from somewhere and they may need food. These kind of, trilateral, quadrilateral, bilateral partnerships is what, at least in the next 8 to 10 years, before again wisdom prevails and we go to multilateralism. I think this is how we foresee arrangements to come up. But partnerships, I think if you look at it from an Indian perspective, partnerships are ecosystem partnerships. We have seen that, I think we have partnered. We have Bear here. We are partnering with them to enhance, rice farmers' livelihood and productivity. So where they are bringing their best technology, we are putting in our farmer relationships and the market relationships together. And we are bringing in many more partners. It could be agri-tech companies, it could be other input companies, it could be finance companies, other startups which provide various kinds of farming services. I think at a hyper-local level, these kind of partnerships is what will take Indian food system to a different level. We have also experienced this in so many other commodity value chains. It could be coffee, where let's say a partnership with some of the large roasting companies in Europe. We have partnered with them. And on the back end side, there are input companies or other service providers who join hands and ensure that farmers are very comprehensively, there is very comprehensive hand-holding of farmers, and all of us work jointly to increase their productivity and capabilities. This is what we have seen in the dairy industry. We have seen it in the sugar industry. And the results are there to see, maybe in pockets, but as it becomes more pervasive, I would say that that's how in a smallholder farmer environment, you can enhance productivity. They do not have the wherewithal, unfortunately, to do it on their own. But if large resourceful stakeholders come together, form the right kind of partnerships, create mutual value, and also find a way to distribute this mutual value among themselves equitably and logically, I think it will yield very good results.
Right. Thanks, Sanjay. So certainly some of these are conceivable. So we may not have much time to do a Q&A, but I think to get a sense of the house, we can hear out a couple of questions and they can be dealt out offline. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for that insightful discussion. In fact, I was part of this Think 20 policy discussion with the European Union a couple of days back, and we were actually discussing mission life and food security. So after the hour-long discussion I heard over here, what I realized is that the problem that remains is over-glamorization of basic commodities. For example, millets. Dr. Rao, you've been speaking about how chefs have been incorporating it, how the Prime Minister has been promoting it, but what it did is shoot up the prices. Come on, $80 for half a kilogram of millet wheat? It's crazy. It's a normal person cannot afford that. So the basic question after an hour of discussion remains is, how do you ensure food for all? How do you ensure nutrition security for all? Thank you.
Any other question to get a sense of the house? Okay, since there's no other question, we'll let Dr. Dayakar answer this and then we can wrap up after that.
60 years of neglect, 6 decades of neglect of this thing has brought the production levels to 14 to 15 million tons. And at this point of time, then we introduced millets popularization, and there's a sudden surge of the demand because before it started, the supply was the problem. Supply was not the problem, demand was the problem. After demand awareness created, then the supply became skewed. And see, this value chain is not fully matured, I feel so. Because about the backward supply chain, what we are talking, the production and consumption markets are disconnected. So there are these distortions is making the temporary manifestation of high prices. Eventually, the governments should take control of certain things. Of course, demand and supply are there. The productivity enhancement things that are taken up by Indian Institute of Millet Research, by the Ministry of Agriculture. There are a lot of things that are being taken up so to even out. And also, what you said in the beginning itself, I was telling you that how these niche markets are not the solution, because we need to take it to the vulnerable groups and the rural and other things. No, but see, I think in economics there is a theory called demonstration effect. Demonstration effect is that the richer country, poor countries tend to imitate the richer countries and all this. Now this was a poor man's crop and it has become a rich man's food today. So now by this eventually it should become like a kurkure where it is available, going to be available. It's a process. I think this process is going to be, because the technology and the advancement are much better than in the past. So I think, I presume in about 5 to 6 years, things are going to be, and millets is going to be mainstream, especially with the government's intervention, trying to see that in a separate channel with Poshan and other programs where the government will be taking that subsidy component part of it and then take it. And the niche markets are also going to come when the supply is going to be enhanced. I think it is general simple economics, but on a short term, perhaps we are facing this. I am sure, see, I come from economics background, I would like to tell you that things are going to be all right. Achhe din aayenge where it is going to be affordable, on par with the rice and wheat.
Thank you. So with that, let me thank all the panelists for very diverse views that are brought in. I think at the core of any solution theme for this is, I think the role of science and technology will remain at the core. Important elements going forward are obviously policy to align the right incentives for all the stakeholders, lead to better partnerships, whether across the value chain or around the different countries as means to resolve it. But I think diversification of diet, continued trajectory and acceleration is going to be key so that both the environment and climate issues are sorted along with the health and access to all. So I think some of these common themes certainly will take us forward. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, with this we draw the curtains on this session. Our sincere gratitude goes out to our distinguished guests for making this extremely insightful session.